This budget and this social welfare bill is designed to build a strong economy and a decent society. Budget 2016 is a carefully designed, responsible, interlocking budget where different pieces come together to form the overall picture. A picture of a country, our country, Ireland, moving in the right direction with living standards being gradually raised in every home. The social welfare package in the budget is similarly carefully designed to ensure a number of core groups benefit and, as I said, to provide for a decent society and improvements in the social welfare structure. It's designed to include pensioners, families with children, including lone parents, carers and people with disabilities. It's also designed to get people back to work, because although we now have 9.3% unemployment, it's fallen again this month, we still have more people out of work than we would like. The Labour Party wants to move, as Tanaiste want to move, to a full employment society for Ireland. Work for everyone who needs it, work for everybody who wants a job. I know that some of the TDs on the opposition benches will, for opposition's sake, vote against this bill. But let me tell you why, on the basis of the clearest evidence, you should support it instead. If you truly want to see the development of a strong economy in Ireland and a decent society, and if you truly want to assist the most vulnerable in society. My department has carried out a social impact assessment of the main tax and social welfare measures in Budget 2016. This assessment is based on the tax welfare micro-stimulation model, SWITCH, developed by the SRI. Social impact assessment is an evidence-based methodology which estimates the likely effect of key policies on household incomes, families, poverty and incentives to employment. The assessment found that average household incomes increased by 1.6% or €1,430 per week as a result of Budget 2016. Importantly, there are higher than average gains for the bottom two quintiles, that is the lowest income households in society, while the smallest gain is at the top quintile. The biggest beneficiaries are lone parents, dual and non-earning couples with children, with an average gain of 2%. So as I said, the budget is particularly focused at families with children, whether families parenting, mum and dad, or the mother parenting on her own with her children. Non-earning lone parents and single-earning couples with children fare above average, gaining around 1.8%. I should emphasise that child benefit expenditure, though universal, favours low-income households. Therefore, Budget 2016 will deliver considerably bigger gains for the poorest households. If there is anyone in this House who votes against this bill, it is because they are placing politics before poorer households. Coming to specific measures, throughout the worst of the crisis, we protected the state pension. I'm now particularly pleased to provide for an above-inflation increase of €3 a week for pensioners and carers aged 66 and over. There's also an increase of €2 a week for adult dependents aged under 66 years of age, and an increase of €270 for adult dependents aged 66 years or over. This will benefit 583,000 pensioners, well over 500,000 of our pensioners, and over 93% adults who live with pensioners, And it's the first weekly rate increase for pensioners since 2009. Now, talking to pensioners, I know that there is a very significant welcome for the fact that for the first time since 2009 we're actually able to increase rates. Personally, I would love if I had €5 or €10 a week to distribute to every pensioner, but this budget has been crafted so that from an economy point of view, from getting people and businesses back to work, we have a balance which, as I said, will assist the different groups in our society, particularly people who are less well off and who are vulnerable. I'm going to be making regulations in the coming weeks for payment of a 75% Christmas bonus, which will benefit older people, carers, people with disabilities, long-term job seekers and lone parents at Christmas time, which is often a financially stressful time of year. For a single person on disability allowance, this will mean a bonus payment of €141. For a pensioner couple, both of whom are in receipt of the state non-contributory pension, it will mean a bonus payment of €327.50. So that's over €6 a week into the household. That same household on the 1st of January will get €3 in respect of anybody with a contributory pension, and €270 in relation to the other adult in a situation where they don't have a pension in their own right. So as you can see, that's a considerable boost to the household income of pensioners, both in terms of the Christmas bonus and the annual increase which arises from January. Some 1.2 million people will receive the Christmas bonus in the first week of December. And I make absolutely no apologies for paying the bonus. As Tanaiste and Labour leader, my focus is on trying to ensure we can improve things for every person and not just for a few. Importantly as well, as I know from talking to pensioners around the country, they asked me on numerous occasions to maintain the core pension rate, which we did. They asked to maintain the free travel, which we did. And they asked us particularly if we could, as circumstances improved, could we bring back the Christmas bonus? And we have been able to do that. 25% last year, now 75% this year. These are the people, particularly our pensioners, who built up our country, who supported their children and their grandchildren when things were very, very difficult. But remember, it also goes to anyone with a disability, anyone who's on long-term social welfare payments, long-term unemployed, and indeed anybody who is parenting on their own. When the government came into office, there were grave fears that the numbers of people who would become unemployed would top over 500,000. The deficit in the social insurance fund was heading towards €2 billion. Unemployment was eventually to peak at 15.1%. As of this week, it stands at 9.3% and is continuing to fall rapidly, thanks to the sustained focus of this government in restoring the economy to growth and in helping our people back to work. As a result of people returning to work in high volumes and more employers now able to reward employees with pay increases, the Social Insurance Fund has been transformed. The 2016 budget estimates provide for Social Insurance Fund income to increase to almost €8.9 billion in 2016, with expenditure estimated at €8.67 billion. This means there will be a projected surplus of €216 million on the fund, which will be the first such surplus since 2007. That means that people who have contributed for their pensions, if we can continue to develop the surplus, can be confident that their pension in retirement that they have contributed for will be there for them, and that we will be able to improve it as we go along. The increase in the minimum wage to €9.15 an hour from 1st of January next is a hugely important measure for low-paid workers. I pledged earlier this year that if we increased the minimum wage, we would address any PRSI step effects that would arise from such an increase. We're doing this in this bill. So put simply, the measures will reduce the weekly PRSI bill for over 88,000 employees and ensure that the benefit of a national minimum wage increase will be felt by all of those who are in receipt of it. This is, of course, in addition to the gains from the USC changes which were announced on budget day. 623,000 families will benefit from this increase. The introduction of a I beg your pardon. So, in relation to helping families, the bill is providing for a €5 increase in the rate of child benefit, the second budget in a row in which child benefit has been increased. This will bring the monthly rate of child benefit from €135 to €140 per child, again from the 1st of January. Child benefit is a crucial support to families through difficult times, in particular to low and middle income families, and the increase will benefit 623,000 families. Almost 1.2 million children will benefit from this increase. The introduction of a paternity benefit scheme will take effect next September, as I announced in the budget. The family income supplement threshold is also being increased by €5 for each of the first 2 children per week from next January. This will mean an additional €3 or €6 per week for over 59,000 low-income working families who have over 131,000 children. I'm also shortly going to make regulations to provide for an increase in the earnings disregard for job seekers' transition payment from €60 to €90 per week. This improved disregard will apply to existing and to new recipients from next January. All earnings above €90 will be assessed at 50% from January. They're currently assessed at 60%. Funding for the schools meal programme will increase by €3 million next year to €42 million. The schools meal programme currently benefits 217,000 children in over 1,700 schools and other organisations. The allocation of an additional €3 million in 2016 will provide for breakfasts for an additional 27,000 pupils, or a lunch or a light meal to almost 12,000 additional pupils. The strong economic recovery that we can see around us is, above all else, a jobs-led recovery, and that's crucial because secure and fairly paid work remains the best protection against poverty. The budget is therefore a pro-work budget. The budget announced increases of €250 per week in the top-up payments for job seekers availing of community employment, the Rural Social Scheme, Gateway, Jobs Initiative and other such schemes. Earlier this year, I introduced a new incentive called the Back to Work Family Dividend, which helps job seekers with families to return to work. This dividend provides an incentive of €1,550 per child in the first year of employment or self-employment, and half that amount in the second year. There are currently already over 9,500 families and 15,000 children benefiting from the dividend. In other words, these are families with children going back to work. This measure, when taken together with the employer incentives, such as Jobs Plus, will ensure that long-term job seekers also benefit from the strong recovery in the labour market. Apart from the rate increases I've already mentioned, the fuel allowance is being increased by €2.50 per week to €22.50 for the duration of the fuel season. This is another targeted measure. It will benefit almost 381,000 households. The name of the Respite Care Grant scheme is being changed to the Carer Support Grant. In light of the important role that carers play in our society, I am particularly pleased to announce that the rate of the grant is to be increased by €325 to €1,700 from the 1st of June 2016. It will be payable to around 86,000 carers next year. In another improvement, carers' allowance will now be paid for 12 weeks after the death of the person being cared for, instead of the current duration of 6 weeks. And I want to thank the carers' organisations who made that proposal to me in the course of our pre-budget discussions. I want to use this opportunity to refer as well to the rent supplement scheme. The Department of Social Protection is currently providing support to approximately 63,800 people living in private rented accommodation. The cost of the scheme in 2015 will be over €298 million. Between rent supplement, housing assistance payment and the rental accommodation scheme, the RAS, the state is currently accommodating almost 100,000 households via the private rented sector or market. Given the size of the state's involvement in the private rented sector, any general increase to rent supplement would serve only to increase rents overall. That would particularly affect low-income households who are renting, including students and low-paid workers. Instead, my department is operating a framework which ensures that families at risk, or indeed individuals at risk, of losing their rented accommodation can get urgent assistance from the Department of Social Protection, from the Community Welfare Service. Department officials will, on a case-by-case basis, increase the rent supplement limits to ensure people stay in their homes. To date, more than 4,400 households have had their rent supplement increased. At the same time, Ministers Kelly and Noonan will in the coming days finalise a housing package which will address both the crucial issues of supply and providing greater certainty for tenants. I am very concerned about the reports in recent days of mistreatment of workers on some, and hopefully only a few, Irish fishing trawlers. Following a decision at Cabinet yesterday, the Government is immediately setting up an interdepartmental task force to examine the complex issues arising. The aim is to formulate a coordinated and effective cross-government approach. My department's Special Investigation Unit, which particularly tackles fraud, will actively participate and assist in any multi-agency approach that emerges or is required in the context of the government and the interdepartmental work that needs to be done on proposed joint initiatives in this sector. We don't want to see any workers being taken, in some cases from tens of thousands of miles away, put on board small fishing vessels. In some cases, if one is to judge by the story, their passports may be taken, they may be restricted in terms of their access to going on land. That is an absolute disgrace in terms of the traditions and the history of this country. And I'm determined, and the government is determined, to see an end to this. I'd like now to just turn to the specific measures contained in the bill. Section 1, the short title, Construction and Collective Citation with the Social Welfare Act. Section 2, the definition of certain common terms used in Part 2 of the bill. Section 3 provides for an increase in the rate of state pension contributory and in respect of persons who are 66 years or older. Increases in the rates of the following schemes: widows, widowers and surviving civil partners contributory pension, death benefit and disablement pension. It also provides for increases for rates for qualified adults. Section 4 in Schedule 1 to the bill will provide for an increase in the personal and qualified adult rates of state pension non-contributory. It also provides for an increase in the rate of carers' allowance as well for recipients who are 66 years or older. That will be particularly important to people on a half-rate carers' allowance looking after their spouse or partner, in addition to whatever state pensions they may be entitled to. Section 5 and Schedule 2 of the bill provide for the renaming of the Respite Care Grant to Carer Support Grant. Section 6 provides for an increase of €325 to the Carer Support Grant from €1,375 to €1,700. Section 7 provides for an increase in the monthly rate of child benefit from €135 to €140. Section 8 provides for an increase of €5 per week in the family income supplement earnings threshold for families with one child and €10 per week in the thresholds for families with 2 or more children. This measure will come into operation on the 7th of January 2016. Section 9 provides for the period in which carers' allowances payable following the death of the person being cared for to be extended to a period of 12 weeks. Section 10 provides for 2 changes in pay-related social insurance: a new tapered PRSI credit for employees insured at Class A whose earnings are between €352 and €424 per week. The upper threshold at which the lower 7.8 Class A rate of employer PRSI applies is being introduced and reduced from €356 to €376 per week. These measures take effect from the 1st of January 2016. I want to advise the House I also intend to introduce amendments at committee stage on a number of matters. As we're all aware, earlier this year we saw the historic result of the marriage equality referendum. The subsequent legislation, the Marriage Bill of 2015, was enacted on the 29th of October. At committee stage, I will be bringing forward amendments to the Social Welfare Consolidation Act 2005 in light of the enactment of that Act. I will also be bringing forward amendments to provide for the inclusion of registered nurses within the definition of medical assessor in the Social Welfare Consolidation Act. These nurses will be employees of the department. The inclusion of credit unions providing personal microcredit loans among the specified bodies for the purposes of the household budgeting scheme, and the correction in the bill as published of the figures for the family income supplement earnings threshold for a family of 7 children. I also intend to bring forward an amendment of the Pensions Act 1990 to enable the Financial Services Ombudsman to carry out the role, duties and function of the Pensions Ombudsman in light of the intended merging of the 2 offices. In conclusion, can I just say that over the recent very difficult and challenging years, our social welfare system has continued to play an essential role safeguarding the most vulnerable people in our society. Having protected that very strong system through the worst of times, we're now strengthening it even further in better times. The social protection measures contained in this bill and in Budget 2016 are built on the foundations of the recovery. The clear objective of these measures are to secure improvements in living standards and to create greater opportunities for every person, every family and every community. And in particular, we have a social welfare package which is very significant this year, the bonus, the improvements in a whole range of different payments, benefiting in particular our pensioners and retired people, people on disability, carers and particularly families with children and families at work with children who are on low incomes. That is all made possible, and I want to acknowledge it, by all of those taxpayers and workers in this country who pay PRSI, and by the employers who contribute PRSI as well. And I want to say that those contributions and the fact that so many more businesses and individual workers are getting back to work has been the mechanism that has enabled us to provide for the improvements and changes that we have made in this year's social welfare bill. And to say that in terms of those people, I have a duty as the Minister for Social Protection to ensure that every cent of their PRSI is used both to improve, as I said, the status of the Social Insurance Fund, which was almost wrecked when I came into office and heading for a deficit of €2 billion, is now going to be back in surplus for the first time next year, so that pensioners and contributors can have confidence in the availability of the retirement pension in this country. But I also have to make sure that all social protection money and all social welfare money goes to the people for whom it's intended, that they get the payments that they are entitled to, but that anybody who seeks to defraud the social welfare system or to take money that rightly should be going to people like our pensioners, our Special Investigations Unit, our inspectors and our staff in the Department of Social Protection will do their best to ensure that that doesn't happen. And on that note as well, I want to thank all of the staff in the Department of Social Protection who faced very difficult times during the crisis, but who during the crisis have transformed the department from the payments department of old into now not just making payments but providing a really good quality public employment service, working with employers to get people back to work. And I think it is important that people should recognise that the public servants in this country working in the Department of Social Protection have made a very special recovery to individual lives, but also to the recovery of our country in general.